Welcome to the Play Big Queen podcast. This is for the woman ready to lead with power, move with confidence, and own your play big self. For my newly minted or late blooming neurospicy visionary babes who are waking up to your power and unmasking your brilliance. For the sovereign leader building success on your own terms. I am your host, Kate Bailey. I am the Play Big Queen. My name is my title and a command for all women. Play Big Queen. I invite you to claim this title for yourself and coronate your Play Big self too, so it can serve you. This is a space for bold embodiment, radical reclamation, unapologetic leadership, and a business that works with your wiring, not against it. Your voice is meant to be bold and heard, and your brilliance is here to be claimed. You are already powerful. I am in service of everyone fucking tired of the people-pleasing grind. We go deep, we get real, and we play big. It's a new era for women on the play big path. Long may we reign. There is something wild that happens when you reach out for help, especially when you're sitting across from someone who's labeled the expert. A therapist, a doctor, a mentor, a coach. We're taught to see expertise as authority, but expertise doesn't automatically make someone the authority on you. And that's what I want to talk about today. Power dynamics in healing relationships and the courage it takes to stay in your truth when you're in a room with someone who's supposed to have more answers than you do. Recently, I had an experience with a therapist that I thought brought this to life in a really personal way. I am starting EMDR therapy again. And the truth is, I've been to EMDR before, but past providers weren't that great at it. They either didn't really understand trauma at the nervous system level, or they weren't attuned enough to catch what was actually happening in my body. So when I found someone who specializes in complex trauma for over 25 years that delivers the therapy over telehealth, I was hopeful because EMDR, when it's done right, is absolutely life-changing. And I say that as someone living with cPTSD and a high rate of dissociation. For me, dissociation doesn't just mean zoning out, it means memory loss. There are massive gaps in my timeline. Whole chunks of my life are just gone. Some of that is trauma. Some of that is because I'm ADHD and my brain literally short circuits when it's overloaded by sensory stimulation. And some of it is just the way I'm wired. It is physically harder for me to stay in my body. And this is a major reason why embodiment work matters so much in my life and why it's been made my life's work. Embodiment is how I practice staying with myself, staying with others, and not disassociating. It's how I intentionally come into presence. And that work is also why my presence is so powerful in coaching sessions with my clients. It's the same reason why so many people who have overcome darkness or things like addiction have so much capacity to experience life and joy and pleasure. When you've experienced the opposite and have come back from that, you find your capacity for the positive in any given area that you've done work on is so expansive. So embodiment is how I practice staying in my body. Staying when things feel overwhelming, staying when my nervous system wants to check out, staying when I'm uncomfortable, but when I'm actually safe. So here's what happened. I had an appointment scheduled, and I realized that I needed to set a few boundaries around my time because my time availability circumstances for the day of the appointment had changed. I booked this appointment 3 months in advance, not knowing that my accounting final was going to be on the same day. So the provider that I booked the appointment with sent me an email and asked if I could meet an hour earlier in the morning which meant I would lose an hour of sleep on my final exam day. I had so much to study for, and the last thing that I wanted to do was drudge up trauma right before testing. Even just filling out all the onboarding therapy forms can be a bit triggering when they ask you about your life and your history. So I reached out to the provider and I clearly and respectfully communicated that I needed to reschedule with the time change. I shared about my capacity challenges with school, how I needed extra time, and how it would actually be more helpful to schedule a couple of weeks out because I had a massive school bill that I had to pay that I didn't realize was going to be due soon. And it would just make more budgetary sense to push it out a couple of weeks. Now, I have a PPO healthcare plan. I should be fully covered, but this therapist that I am scheduling with is actually out of network, which means cash up front and hundreds of dollars per session plus additional funds for equipment is going to be needed for these sessions. And that's typically not a problem, and it's so worth it, but it was on so many levels just poor timing with everything that was going on with my school. And so I tried to set this boundary around my time and reschedule, and the response the provider sent was just deeply triggering and riddled with red flags. So here's what the therapist said in the email response to my request to reschedule after they had told me that they wanted to reschedule me for an hour earlier. They said, "Katie, it is normal to feel anxiety before a first session. Have you thought that it might actually help you study better and be in a better headspace? You have, I think, probably had the opposite experience with talk therapy in the past where you may feel worse after a first session. Is that a fair guess? Of course, it is up to you, but avoidance like this is part of what maintains trauma. Let's not keep kicking the can down the road. It actually may contribute to more anxiety if you postpone. It's only an hour of your time. I understand you're feeling a bit frazzled. I hope to see you on Zoom tomorrow." So, how is this problematic? This is something that we see a lot in the coaching and therapy spaces when providers are coming from a place that's like more with their business operating hat on and trying to like land the sale or get the client or the patient in the door. They are not in this moment coming from a place of being trauma informed. They are not collaborating with the patient or client, and they wind up gaslighting and pathologizing a person and compromising their authority. So let's go over identifying specific red flags from this conversation so you can learn from this and identify these red flags quickly if you find yourself in the same situation. So, red flag number one, they pathologized my boundary. I clearly expressed two legitimate practical reasons for rescheduling: an academic obligation, my final exam, and a financial strain. They reframed that as avoidance that maintains trauma. That's inaccurate and invalidating. And a trauma informed clinician should respect self knowledge and pacing and not label it as avoidance when it's actually resourcing and boundary setting. Red flag number two. They assumed my emotional state. They told me what I quote unquote probably experienced in past therapy and implied I was frazzled. That's not only wildly presumptive, but it's subtly patronizing. And they were also patronizing by calling me Katie, which is a super familiar and infantilized version of my name. I never told this provider my name was Katie. I either go by Kate or Catherine. Okay, red flag number three. They dismissed my autonomy. They said, let's not keep kicking the can down the road, and it's only an hour of your time. These sentences completely minimize my emotional and financial considerations. I clearly explained why rescheduling would help, and they discounted that reasoning instead of collaborating with me. That's a power dynamic issue, and a trauma-informed therapist should know how to communicate to empower autonomy, not override it. To completely deny economic or energetic circumstances is just not trauma-informed care. Red flag number four, they didn't address my financial timing concern at all. So I was direct about my financial circumstances with school bills, which is crucial to safety and trust. They completely ignored that and focused entirely on session psychology. And that avoidance of practical concerns can make clients feel unseen and unsafe and prioritizes making the sale over the patient's well-being. So all these red flags left me feeling disappointed and super gross because my self-awareness around my circumstances as someone already doing something really big and challenging, like paying to go back to school at 44, was boundary that I had that got reframed as avoidance. My communication was interpreted through the lens of a provider who's frustrated with patients not showing up rather than through the lens of the individual patient's reality. And as a result, they pathologized my self-awareness and my ability to adapt and create new boundaries by saying avoidance is what maintains trauma. And I get that. And I understand the logic through the lens of a therapist or a coach who has a bad habit of being quick to label anyone and everyone through the lens of trauma or attachment theory, calling people anxious or avoidant. But the over pathologization and inaccurate pathologization of avoidance in the coaching and therapy spaces absolutely needs to stop. Personally, there are a lot of things that I take immediate action on. It's leftover from my time working in EMS and part of my hyperactive ADHD and how my personal anxiety manifests, right? If I know something needs to be done and I can see how to do it, I know how to do it, then I do it immediately. I'm actually really type A that way. I get into massive action as soon as I can. In fact, I need to be the opposite sometimes and do what I was trying to do with this appointment and pump the brakes and not just go all in and pace myself in ways that are really supportive. And this therapist couldn't know that I am type A and a big action taker after one call, right? Because they didn't know me. I knew me. But they were acting like they knew me and basing their interpretation of my boundaries on their past clients. My wanting to reschedule wasn't avoidance, it was a boundary. It was me saying, hey, I'm human. I have limits. I'm managing my time, my energy, my resources. And that's where the power dynamic starts to show up. Because when you ask for help and the person you're asking interprets your boundary as pathology, you suddenly have to carry the labor of both advocating for yourself and holding the emotional fallout of being misunderstood. And that is a lot to hold, especially for someone already navigating trauma recovery. But I held it. First, I sent an email back replying to all the red flags and restating my boundaries. I also said, oh, and on another quick note, I actually go by Kate or Catherine, not Katie. And the provider sent an email reply back with only the words, understood, Kate, with a semicolon parenthesis smiley face. But it was crystal clear to me that they didn't actually understand. And now they were avoiding my direct concerns on a whole new level. So I decided that I was going to keep the appointment and do conversational cleanup with this new therapist. Because even though I was trying to protect my boundaries with my energy and my test and maybe give myself some sort of, financial breathing room with this $8,000 school bill that I had, this back and forth email chain where they weren't letting me reschedule was taking up so much energy, and I didn't want this to be the dynamic going forward. So I kept the meeting with the therapist, and I got on the call first thing in the morning on the day of my test, and I was direct. I was assertive, and I said, before we dive in, I want to name something from our last email exchange because it's important to address directly, especially if we're going to create an ongoing relationship in this capacity. I told them in full transparency, I thought about being a no-show and canceling today. I know your intention probably wasn't to incorrectly pathologize or make assumptions about me being avoidant, but parts of your message did exactly that. And there were also assumptions made about my emotional state, about me being frazzled, and about my past therapy experiences that actually didn't reflect my reality at all. My attempts to set boundaries around scheduling based on new information about my situation this week were presented as avoidance rather than what they actually were, which were practical realities. And I don't owe you an explanation, but I do want to be clear that I need you to be interested in my reality without assuming. And I need to be able to maintain my autonomy to set my own schedule and have my own boundaries honored in a relationship like this. And for me, working with a trauma-informed practitioner means my pacing, boundaries, and resource realities are respected without reinterpretation. So if we move forward, it has to be from a foundation of mutual respect and collaboration. Now, for anyone listening, depending on who you are and what communication skills you have, saying something like that may or may not be easy for you. But when it comes to my personal self-advocacy, I do have the privilege of being gifted in interpersonal communications, and I have verbal gifts, and that helps me greatly. But this is where I want to pause and make it personal for you. If you are in therapy, coaching, or any kind of healing work, and your energetic capacity or maybe your financial reality means that sometimes you have to choose between doing your sessions and burnout, that does not mean you are being avoidant. That means you're human. That means you're aware of your limits and that any kind of boundary setting is actually trauma healing in action. When I brought all of this up to my new therapist, I was direct, I was assertive, and to their credit, they heard me. They didn't get defensive. They apologized. They acknowledged what happened. They said the words, "I am really sorry. I shouldn't have made those assumptions. I'll be more curious going forward." And honestly, that response, instead of a reaction, is what shifted the whole relationship. And we had a really great first session. They are so knowledgeable. And later that day, I went on to get an 80 on my final. And if you've been following along, you know that I'm a straight A student who is like getting ready to celebrate their first B because this accounting class was so hard. But it's also important to recognize that I did okay on this final, not because the therapist was right. I wasn't avoiding the appointment. I did okay on the final because I always rise to the occasion. That is just my character. And sometimes I do it to my own detriment because after that final, after navigating all that communication and all that self-advocacy early in the morning, I was burned the fuck out. And then I ran a 5K for a breast cancer run the next morning, and I was completely gassed because I was overcommitted and because I didn't reschedule. And that led to a full body flare-up. I have decreased mobility today. I am hobbling around the house with a burned out body trying to recover. But sometimes there are trade-offs, and sometimes it works out. The hard truth is sometimes when we show all the way up and it burns us out, there are still benefits. I'm going to now be doing trauma therapy with someone who's known to get every single one of their patients' results within 6 to 9 months. And that's because I decided to sacrifice in the moment for the future. Now, that can't always be the choice. It is not sustainable. But still, repair, real repair, is a form of healing too. Repairing a relationship where someone engaged in a dynamic that didn't respect your autonomy or authority reteaches your body that safety can exist inside connection, not just outside of it. And that's the thing about power. When you've lived through trauma, power can feel like something that's always being taken or held over you. But healthy power is shared. It is co-created. It is safe. And that's what trauma-informed relationships, whether they're therapeutic, coaching, or otherwise, should feel like. They should feel respectful, curious, collaborative. And even though doing the self-advocacy, conversational cleanup, and the emotional labor that comes with waking someone up to the fact that they're not respecting your authority on yourself, even though that work typically needs to be done at the most inconvenient times, You shouldn't have to surrender your autonomy to receive help. This whole experience reminded me that courage doesn't always look like leaving and severing the relationship, even though a lot of the time it does. Sometimes courage is staying long enough to name the rupture and see if repair is possible. Sometimes it's saying, "This didn't feel right. Can we talk about it?" Or, "This happened and I'm not available for this going forward." Sometimes it's allowing someone to rise to the occasion and meet you there. Because when they do, when they actually respect your power instead of feeling threatened by it or trying to manipulate it for their own gain, that is where real healing begins. And let's be honest, people have a hard time holding nuance and make a lot of assumptions when you need help. They assume you're fragile. They assume you're lost. They assume you're helpless, or that if you struggle with something in one area, you must struggle with it in all areas. They assume they know what empowerment should look like for you. But getting help doesn't erase your autonomy or your wisdom. It doesn't cancel your authority over your own experience. It doesn't mean that someone else knows what safety, healing, or empowerment look like in your body. We talk a lot about coaches or therapists, quote unquote, holding you through it or holding the space. But the truth is, experts can hold knowledge, wisdom, and information, but they don't actually hold you. You hold you. And maybe that's the biggest takeaway here. Healing isn't about who knows more. It's about who knows you better. You get to be the expert on what empowerment feels like. You get to decide how your healing unfolds. You get to say, this relationship is worth the work when you assess that repair is possible, and you get to walk away when it isn't. That's what it means to live empowered. That's what it means to stay embodied. So if you're in that space right now where you're asking for help, trying to heal, navigating the courage to stay or the clarity to leave, remember, your needs are not inconvenient. Your boundaries are not barriers to healing. They are the framework that make healing possible. That's it for today, Queen. Take what lit you up, leave what didn't. You know what serves. If you want to stay in this Play Big Queen orbit, get the rituals, resources, and real talk that fuels your Play Big self, go to xxxkatebailey.com, scroll to the bottom, and join this community. This is where bold women gather. Neurodivergent visionaries, disability warriors, sacred disruptors. If this episode spoke to you, leave a review on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube. Leave comments, give me all the stars, share it. That's how we create change that ripples and how this podcast gets out to more people who need it. If you're ready to work together to make your Play Big self not just a vision, but a reality that you embody, then head to xxxkatebailey.com, go to the Work with Kate section, and join in on a program that feels right for you. Or tag me on socials and tell me a moment that truly served you from this episode. Until next time, remember to honor your own timing, value your own unique way, and most of all, when you come face to face with your boldest desires, trust your brilliance and play big, Queen. Hey, Queen, are you still here? Good. That means you're not just curious. You are being called and want more. I am here for the ones who want more than party trick mindset hacks, the ones who need nervous system rooted, neurodiverse affirming space held by someone who is trauma trained so they can rise on their terms. My work is designed to center folks navigating ADHD, autism, disability, trauma, or mental health challenges, and their brilliance all at once. You do not need to be someone who identifies as neurodivergent or someone who has a disability to benefit from this work. If you're feeling called, you belong here. I believe in and support queer and trans rights, Black Lives Matter, sex worker rights, Palestinian, Ukrainian, and global South liberation, religious autonomy, and dismantling abusive systems. If that's too much for you, then babe, this isn't your podcast and you know where the unfollow is. But if that lights a fire within you, and you are inspired to learn more, then my Play Big Queen, you are home. You can also head over to xxxkatebailey.com/about to learn more about me, my company, qualifications, methodology, values, worldviews, philosophies, and my mission. My mission is to activate 10,000 women with invisible disabilities to lead, create, speak up, and claim the spaces that they were told to shrink inside. Because their leadership, your leadership, will change the world. If you know that's you, declare it. Put your energetic line in the sand and tell me. Email me at info@playbigqueen.com and tell me why this work is so important for you, and we can explore opportunities to work together and make your Play Big dreams a reality.